And just want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. We know we got a crowd online too. We even have one of our participants online tonight, Raina Leon, Nomadic Press, and so much more. You're joining us online tonight, so shout out to Raina. Raina, say some words so we can make sure.
Hey y'all, it's great to be with you. I'm a little congested and keeping my cold to myself. So.
How's my sound? My sound all right, Raina?
Oh, your sound is gorgeous.
All right, great, appreciate that. So welcome folks to the. I'll take this down for just a second. I'm Chris Rogers, program director here at the Paul Robeson House and Museum. Just really want to welcome you all to the space tonight. Certainly not the first time we have hosted Thread Makes Blanket Press, and we know it won't be the last time either. Marissa, shout out to Marissa in the back with the books and the broadside. We see you. Thank you so much. I do always feel treasured being here. I've been a volunteer at the Paul Robeson House and Museum since 2015. And the work that we do is yes about lifting up the legacy of Paul Robeson, Eslanda Robeson, the Robeson family, and so many others that contributed to his legacy. You can see by these amazing boards that were designed and made by Charles Blockson. But also it's about continuing to live the legacy of Paul Robeson, right? Continue to understand the power of the arts as a tool for social change. And with that, it's also about continuing to honor the folks who have paved the way in the arts and lift up a lot of the emerging artists of both local, regional, and national and international now from the people we've been reaching through the pandemic in terms of how we create a platform for those sorts of arts to enter the world and to engage in just how we, create platforms for change. So I'm really excited about tonight's event. I got a dear friend and a collaborator with the house here with us is going to help start us off. We know tonight is really a tribute in the Philadelphia launch of Joel Diaz's Porter's Ideas of Improvisation. There's a lot of ways that it's like flowing through the word of improvisation. You know what I mean? I'm gonna listen to the poets and how y'all want to say it tonight. And yeah, so I'm just really excited. We're going to begin with Kerwin, and we're going to bring in Raina online to share a couple poems. We should be able to hear them in the space, but they'll also be broadcast online. And then we'll bring back Kerwin and introduce our feature poet of the night, Joel Diaz Porter. So how could I introduce Kerwin tonight? I will say Kerwin and I were just here together on Saturday as part of No Name Book Club. And Kerwin has been the facilitator for the past 6 to 8 months, recently since we, restarted after the pandemic, and just creating a space of dialogue, of engagement with world-changing ideas, but also being attentive to our internal worlds as well, right? And our conversation, Savannah's always, is a constant a person who's there too. The conversations can go from just our internal worlds into how we change the world and engage with, both communities, local and abroad. And it's just really exciting. I'm always thankful. I do have a copy of Jump Ship, a signed copy. Also give Kerwin the credit that before we had to close for the pandemic, Kerwin packed this house out. It was the last time that we could pack the house in such a way that it was just like, yo, wherever you could stand, it's fine. And then, the world changed around us and it was like, okay, we know we can't do that level anymore. So I'm really excited is this new work we get today?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes. I'm really excited for the read, and I want to bring to the stage Kerwin Sutherland.
Man, thank you, everybody. Oh, let me take this down. So yeah, I'm excited to be here to celebrate Joel's work, because I'm not going to go into an intro because I have longer things to say, but I'll just say I'm just happy to be here and celebrate this great work. And so I'm reading like a couple poems. Most of them are coming from a sort of collection I'm working on of Ars Poetica, called Ars Poetica of the Belly. I've been writing a lot about body image, and since the pandemic especially, it's been a lot, and kind of much different from what I write before in a lot of ways. So yeah. Ars Poetica of the Belly that named me Husky, big body boy clinging to the leavings of a shoddy selection of two big khakis and distended shirts, protrusion out of overlapping. Turn to the side, I see poke out points where laughing mouths would affix. Daddy, siblings, my own, to eat, to eat, to eat. Can you believe I ate myself out of the mirror every day to fit? Ars Poetica of the Belly, that's fat and gaping, open, exposed, rotting, bones of digestion decompose inside my mind. I have no belly. Fat is just soap. Suds whisk flesh to heaven, shine a light on me thin. Now a god notices frame. Inside my mind, a skeleton supposes skin is necessary, and I suppose, necessary now without a vessel around my hips. The ship of obese I always spoke of was full of chains. Now the metal is at least up in the air. Inside my mind, if I wasn't so big, inside my mind, I could escape my mind. Ars Poetica of the Belly. Before I read the definition of stomach, I thought it was a junk reservoir, a bent organ folded past any mechanical use, a measure of area, pain times food times speed, quick times fill times expand, years flexing hand to table, communion without knowing. The stomach moves, contracts, asphyxiates comfort with acid, kills. Ars Poetica of the Belly that puts on a front. I could scream, but somebody would hear me. So I hold it, and the hot gets overwhelming. And I put my hand on my stomach and feel an animal shifting, or my mother knocking, telling me to unlock. But I promise, you won't like me without this makeshift clamp, I promise. The secrets hidden in me will change me colors if I just burst. If I just say today, right now, I deserve hearing how I really sound. I don't know who would stay. So this last poem I'm going to read is kind of like a meditation on my mother, who I lost when I was 8 years old to sarcoidosis, and the doctors didn't know it was sarcoidosis at the time, so they were medicating her incorrectly. And it took a while for me to kind of wrap my mind around my thoughts about it. And I'm still doing that. But these are just kind of like random thoughts, I guess. And it really doesn't have any title. So part one. Open your mouth wide as a casket. Let out no sound unless it's God. You have to wait on grief. Part two. Sarcoidosis inflames tissue. If you feed cough syrup to a flame, the flame laughs. Doctors asked the flame inflammatory questions and expected the lung to reverse. Close to the end, my mother wrote her thoughts on her hands. No one could tell her why. We could only throw our knowings back, our petty wishes. When you get out of here, we gonna. Part 3. Why take speech and leave breath to stop the mind? I asked the stethoscope because the doctor's face was gone, hidden behind vials of blood. After the first lung collapsed, you don't believe in numbers. They lie, tell you it's nothing but a common cold. What cold is so frigid it scars? Part 4, blame arrives out of lack of evidence. It's unscientific but sharp. Each letter is edged. If I say, you shouldn't have yelled at her so much, the line balloons, translates into, she died because every day you came home late and drunk and screaming. Part 5, my mother's last pose, supple-cheeked, peaceful besides her mind nipping at her edges. I remember fear first, how the burner bent the comb's teeth, and when the hair transitioned to air, the sighs ate the smoke. Part 6, I thought magic was double-sided. Stop a curse, stop God. White sheet slow roll. There's nothing stopping death, not even goodness or tears or plans. How real is a child who can't plead his mama back? Part 7, the scripture I read didn't make the doctor smart. The lungs supposed to triage just laid flush. Nobody spoke, so I made a pact to give my mind the only rights to my love. Thank you. So yeah, thank you. And I'll hand it over to Raina. I hand it over to Chris, who introduced Raina. Thank you.
Yeah. So Raina, and just an example of who Raina is, right? So Raina has been working with Nomadic Press and starting this Philly node, right? And they've been doing these readings. We got a new one coming up. I'm sure Raina's going to give the plug too when it comes that way, of the Two Rivers reading series here in Philly. And it's wild to me because while you're engaging with the poetry reading, and Raina is like the host, in the chat is just like catching lines and words from the poets as they're speaking. And I love that, Raina is able to, while Kerwin was even performing, still able to do that. And it shows how much of an engaged and active listener and noticer that Raina is. And it certainly is something that you feel in their poetry. So I'm really excited to introduce a Robeson House friend as well, someone we've collaborated with on programs and looking forward to collaborating with again, Raina Leon.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I was like, I'm not typing fast enough. I'm so delighted to be with you all today. Joel, I was so looking forward to giving you a big hug. It's been a long time. And Kerwin, last time I saw you, I did give you a big hug. So that was a delight. But again, I'm keeping my germs to myself. And I am really excited about the partnership with the Robeson House and Nomadic Press. And we have this reading, which will have space for an open mic on Thursday. And I'll drop that in the chat later with the Facebook page and folks who might be interested. We're going to be virtual until February, where we'll be hybrid actually at the Robeson House and museum, as well as online. So some poems. A new poem, which doesn't have a title. My father calls my children crazy for running, for shouting with glee. As they run from him, get that boy, Pop, get that boy. And though it is sweet, and we all laugh, a part of me shivers at how his mouth learned to fix this sentence. How many times as a child did he hear, get that boy, or shout it? How many times did he flash and slice a blade just to get a spray to run the opposite of red in the dark? It's crazy what I know and don't about his beginnings. And now my children are crazy in laughter, crazy in joy. Running is crazy too. Someday, some point in the future, who will be still first? And whoever it is, won't that be crazy too? So this poem, however, my daughter is a pandemic baby, and she was born 2 days before George Floyd was killed. And this time will always be scored into my memory of holding this newborn baby at the beginning of the pandemic, unable to connect with people, unable to go to protests because keeping her alive was my protest. And hearing the car parades of mourners and protesters and activists going down the street. The poem. And one thing you need to know is koto is elicottero in Italian. My husband is Italian, so we have some Italian words in our home. Hover. Above us, there are no helicopters, not like when the wind smelled like California soot. And every hour, sirens wove their hair into ours and sung names to enchant cacophony. Say their names, and we were home. Your sister, newborn in my arms, protecting her life of protest. Weeks before, each time a plane scored the Berkeley sky in white, you would point up, say, Mama. Because I am always in the sky, even when my skin burns in the sun next to yours. How my eyes leak with storms you cannot yet name. We stand in unhinged weather. There are no helicopters today. You bang on a wheelbarrow with dried bamboo stalks as drumsticks and lift your toddler throat up to shout, Koto! Over and over again, a screamo chorus. Lyrics perfectly formed to your ears. I nod only, yes, and keep beat. At the People's Park, marchers assemble with banners of I can't breathe. San Pablo, I hear the horns of that car parade inside. The mourners shout behind masks from open windows while a virus flies around us all, pandemic and crown and white. Surrounded by fences, I can keep you safe and breathing until I can't. Every door has a threat of splinter. There are no helicopters today. Koto, you yell. Somewhere they descend, somewhere a body hangs halfway between metal and earth. And I love that you're actually with me in my home because you can hear my babies probably in the background too. And I'll read you two last poems. One is called The Only Color. The only thing you need to know about this poem is that my son and my daughter both had color fixations, like categorizing all colors as the same. So for my son, every color was verde. And for my daughter, still, if you ask her like, oh, point to the black one, she'll point to the black one. If you ask her to point to the purple one, she'll point to the purple one. But if you ask her what color is it, she always says blue. So it's fascinating to me how they talk about color at first was linked to this. So for my son, it was verde, the only color. Verde, 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 every color is verde. And I think on Federico Garcia Lorca, how I read this poem to him, days old, his whole body less than 6 pounds on my chest. And now he stands, a wild octopus boy, on a chair reaching for the markers, verde, verde, he says. Though the uncapped tool marks page to orange, and his father says, he knows what the best color is. I say naranja or anaranjado. He has to know his colors and go into a diatribe about school, not being behind. It is not about school. He is my son. And so the box waits, a check mark of abuses woven into his identity. Will he ever be able to just be the creative child who says verde, verde, verde for all the colors? Glorified for how his mind stretches divergent. My husband does not know that the box can be a casket. And each day we must fight for it not to be. Ahmad ran on a street lined with green leaves. Lorca wrote a poem. They shot him too. So bright, I just want my son to know his colors and live. And this last poem is a spell, time magic. I am writing you a new spell that uncoils from the spell of your making. Silver filament thread that carried your glimmer to lining rest, chosen and made. You were chosen and made, frozen and unfrozen, carried and placed by a needle, measured in microns. Womb, a fabric pinprick. I write you a spell that imprint will gild the ways possible, and speech will take shape in your bone set and viscosities. I watch you in baby form asleep beneath stripes of white and black. You are firelight, cast free. I write you the spell of freedom in water, ice, thought grooved into page. I write you angelic sheen that you carry on your cheek still in this 6th month. Ever after, the stroller channels gravel in winter's quiet park as I tap keys, my bare feet on white marble while you sleep in crib. Your papa snores his lullaby, only the dead know whose mouth first formed this sound. Tied in you, ripples out, then back again, vulnerability in reverb. To birth you, I consulted a Reiki healer. I filled my house with orange roses, held rose quartz, offered my points to an acupuncturist needles. So many other healers chanted, heal, heal within my own mind, offered vortexes swirling within me, a fixed softness to welcome you who are a sign of water, born between luck of 16 and unluck of 17. The spell, I am writing you a spell, the first work of your tempo. May you see generations. This, the spell, be free, be free, be free. Thank y'all. I'm just so delighted to be with you.
Yeah, so Raina should be able to hear us if you speak loud enough, should be able to go through the mic. So I don't know if anybody wants to just share a couple words. I know you kind of look up at the screen. She still is on video, you would like to, but I just want to make sure that we honor, I know you couldn't be here in the space with us, and it felt even cool to be in the home with you as, you know, the noises of children as this wonderful poems about family. You know, it was just, you wouldn't get that if it was here, you know? So I just want to say, you know, thank you, Raina, and certainly we wish you to be fully well, fully recovered, and certainly we'll be with you in community soon.
Thank you. And thank you for making it possible for me to be present and to share my home with you. And apparently I'm on air. That's my background for today.
So thank you once again. I'm gonna bring up Kerwin. And if anybody who's watching, I'm gonna switch this video back.
Hello again, everybody. Thank you, Raina. One of the most giving people that I've met recently, and everything she does, I'm like always on board. So, so thank you. So introduction. Before I read Joel's bio, I just wanted to share like a few, I guess, instances of encounter. And the first one is the first time I, you know, saw Joel sort of in action, which was at Split This Rock Festival. And Sarah Browning is in the audience who headed that up. And there was a panel with the Black Rooster Collective. And that conversation blew me away, one. Two, it modeled the possibility of what a collective could be, a writing collective could be. And I just remember them talking about, you know, having a consistent meeting, I believe it was Monday at every night. And the type of rigor they would have with, you know, going through their poems and critiquing. And it definitely modeled, like, you know, what I tried to do with like some of the workshops that I have, which was you know, some held here in the Robeson House. And so that was like one of my first encounters. And I would say the second one was actually in reference to my book Jump Ship. I don't think even Marissa knows this, but I had sent Joel my book Jump Ship, and I was like, just tell me what you think. You know, I wasn't really asking for a blurb. I just wanted to know like his thoughts, and I got back some really really tough, but great, you know, critiques. And after he sent it to me, I think I sent back a question about essentially legibility. I was having issues with audience and trying to find a way to make my poems like mean something on the page when, you know, I was like, oh, like this doesn't make any sense when I write it down. And so he sent me this quote that I want to read. You have to trust your reader and remember that if they don't get everything the first time through the poem, that's a feature, not a bug. One of the many benefits of prosody and euphonium in poetry is that they can provide a reader with something to grasp and enjoy before they even begin to deal with the meaning. One thing you cannot do is both be a good poet and write to the lowest common denominator. So after yeah, that's crazy, right? So after I read that, I was like, okay, yeah, like, you know, yeah, like, you know, if it comes out, you know, funky and junky, okay, you know, then, you know, we could go with some revision and see how I can, you know, make the funky and junky sometimes more funky and junky, you know, like, so yeah, so that, I think, and in saying that, I will say, you know, we haven't like been in community like very many times or for long, but I do believe that he is one of the greatest teachers I've had in poetry, even for the small amount of times that we've met. They've been rich. So yeah, so I just wanted to offer that before I read the bio. And also get the book if you have it. Joel Diaz Porter's Ideas of Improvisation interrogates how the eye of the imaginary can appear perpendicular to the axis of the real. In addition to the expected body of words, he improvises on the ideas of the lyric by marooning text to create ghost poems which float above the page and add a new haiku-like dimension. Like the rook and brook, in Ideas of Improvisation, we hear how Diaz Porter, a neurodiverse technician of the text, reformulates form to navigate the spectrum of possibility. So yeah, and here we go, Joel Diaz Porter. Good
evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank you, Karan, for that wonderful introduction. So let me see. Well, first of all, thank you to Marissa for agreeing to publish the book and putting up with my very idiosyncrasies as we work through the process of bringing the project to fruition. And then, of course, thank you to the Paul Robeson House. First of all, just for being here and for helping to keep his legacy alive. And then secondly, for, you know, allowing us to be here. Where do I start? You guys mind if I put on my mask? Okay. All right, so I'm going to start by one of the poems in the book is available as a broadside. So that's this poem here, Still Life in Chalk on Asphalt. And so I don't often read this poem because it's what I call a landscape poem. And so it's non-linear. And so it presents challenges in terms of attempting to read it. But one of the things about it is any reading of it is improvisatory for me because I generally don't read it the same way every time. So I just want to point out a couple of things. The words, for those of you, I don't know if you can see it, but The words form like a kind of a map of a neighborhood, like not unlike the neighborhood that we're in. And in the book, there's two types of text. There's the black text, which forms what I call the host poem. And then there's the red text, which forms like ghost poems, which are additional poems that live on top of or inside. I like to think of them as being superimposed inside of the other poem. So, for example, here, and a lot of the ghost poems are Japanese short forms, so they're haiku or senryu. And so this poem also contains a couple of haiku and senryu within it. And then the ghost poem is also one. So the ghost poem starts with here, and it reads, between flashes, a single fallen leaf. And so the poem is, I guess, dealing with the issue of Black people being killed in various ways. So it goes squad car, ambulance. A light flashes a kind of hope. EMTs on knees. Mary J. weeping, telling Martha. A girl rapping silence around her. Petals falling on a wet Black boy. A single verb on an 8-sided red sign. A liquor bottle cracking up. A puddle of brake fluid. The sound of red in the rain. A crow staggering a power line. Our Father, who is art in heaven. August clouds burst between raindrops. Gunshots. Yellow tape billowing in a hungry wind. Fallen leaf, what's left of Michael Brown. White outline of a rigorous argument. So there's a lot of stuff going on, but one of the things in here is this section down here that says fallen leaf. It literally reads fallen leaf, what's left of Michael Brown, which is my homophonic rendering of the name of Michael Brown. So yeah, improvisation. For me, improvisation is about, I have a lot of ideas about improvisation, obviously. But one of them, I think the central is the idea of play. So, you know, even in jazz, where there's a common place where people think of improvisation and jazz solos, like the idea of play, just having fun, you know, you're in the moment, but then you're also playing how you incorporate things around you. So a real big thing in this book is the idea of superimposition. And so in the book, I borrow ideas from math and physics because I'm a nerd like that. But superposition is the idea of, say, like if you take a particle like an electron, and it can have two binary states. So we'll call them spin up and spin down. So one of the things that they found out in the early 20s was that when you go to measure the electron, you can't tell what the state is until you measure it. And then it goes to one or the other. But like it's only a probability before then. So the electron is both spinning up and spinning down at the same time, which is a very weird idea for human brains like to try to grip. And then it's the idea is that the measurement forces it into one of the two states. And so there's actually three states. There's the state of it being up, the state of it being down, and then the state where it's superimposed. So I really like this idea of superimposition as a metaphor, as a way of playing with a lot of different kinds of ideas. So for example, the ghost poems are poems that are superimposed inside of the other poems. And all of those poems, all the ghost poems were written after the host poems were written. So it was literally a process of me going through the poems and improvising, finding the other poems. Okay, so having said all that, I'm going to share this poem because Marissa asked me to read it. So one of my favorite sentences in the English language is actually one word. And it's a weird little feature of the English language that you can repeat the word. So the sentence, buffalo, 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 buffalo. That's a grammatically correct sentence in the English language. So I will go through it. We'll go through a shorter version of it. So buffalo, 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 right? How is that a grammatically correct sentence? Because buffalo can be a city, right? Buffalo can be a verb, and then buffalo can be a noun referring to a large mammal. So these mammals from buffalo, buffalo, other buffalo. So like in my crazy mind, this is like the opposite of superimposition, where you have like two ideas that are combined in one. Here you have like one word, but it has all these various states. So there's a poem in the book called An Idea of Improvisation with Rumbling Clouds. And so it's just me improvising off of that idea. And it's a very short poem. Say buffalo, buffalo, buffalo. Do buffalo, 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 buffalo until buffalo, 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 buffalo. Right.
Brandon's also going crazy on
And so the ghost poem there is Rumbling Clouds, buffalo, 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 buffalo. And so to me, that's like the visual of like, you know, buffalo on the horizon. And so anyway, yeah. All right. So we're in the city of Philadelphia. I'm originally, in case y'all haven't noticed or haven't heard, I am originally from the city of Pittsburgh. It'll come up a few more times, but there's one thing, well, there's a few things that Pittsburgh and Philadelphia share besides being in the Keystone State. And one of them is a woman who grew up in my neighborhood, and her name is Phyllis Hyman. She was a very famous R&B singer. So Phyllis Hyman was actually born in Philadelphia. And then when she was an infant, her parents moved to Pittsburgh. And so she grew up in St. Clair Village, which is the project. So a lot of people from Philly claim Phyllis Hyman, although she only lived here for like a very short period of time. But when she became famous on a Philadelphia record label. So there's a famous song by a Philly group called Bet Your By Golly Wow. And she covered that song. So one of my poems is called Bet Your By Golly Wow for Phyllis Hyman. So this poem is a Italian sonnet. It has a ghost poem, but then it also has some footnotes, and all of the footnotes are haiku. So I'll read the ghost poem, then I'll read the body of the poem, and then I'll read the haiku as footnotes. And so, yeah, I grew up in a housing project called St. Clair Village. It's on the south side of Pittsburgh. And I think everything else is pretty self-explanatory. Phyllis Hyman, unfortunately, took her life in 1995. I think she was in her mid-40s. And it was in the month of June, June 1995. Bet Your By Golly Wow for Phyllis Hyman. Your lips, naked feathers, June rain. What blue whale is this, whose child so alone their tasseled scarf of tightly knit notes trails to caress green hills past dusk? Or quotes lush echoes, bouncing like bald fists off stone faces that flail or float in Southside streams, warning throats to beware their half-sip woes. Pulling bipolar boxcars in their flow, exiting St. Clair Village under steam. Phyllis, how your lips once puckered with flair, barely brushing our naked neck most nights, with lace feathers of whistled melody rippled out of June rain. What splits our air, daring still to dip or flutter? Whose kite, straining at its cord, dying to twist free? Last train, her mascara still running. June darkness, fireflies pulse into police lights. On the shoulder of the pallbearer, a butterfly. Okay, Raina was lovely enough to share some of her poems about family and motherhood. And so I'm going to read a couple of poems about fatherhood or, being a child, whatever, from various perspectives. So, Pittsburgh. The baseball team is called the Pirates, and the most famous player to play for the Pirates is Roberto Clemente, who's also like Rainer Boricua. So when I was a kid, he was my favorite baseball player. His nickname in English was the Great One. His nickname in Spanish was El Magnifico. This poem begins with an epigraph from a poem that Clemente himself wrote. He wrote it in Spanish, is my translation. So I'll read the ghost poem first. El Magnifico. The sound of praying shudders our cracked window. Who am I? I am a small point in the eye of the full moon. I need only one ray of the sun to warm my face. I need only one breeze from the trade winds to refresh my soul. What else can I ask if I know that my sons really love me? Roberto Clemente. Even under a heavy quilt, there's a breeze from a distant transistor radio. My lips mimic a slice of honeydew as they remember it's New Year's Day, the last before heading back to school. Straining to hear the broadcast above my brother Jeff snoring in the bunk below, I roll over. The regular program has been interrupted by the sound of waves washing against the shore, which I pretend is not my mother praying. It's January in Pittsburgh, which is to say the radiator shudders against what howls outside our cracked window. After hopping down on the cold linoleum and tiptoeing to Mama's bedroom door, I cup one ear to the plies of wood. The radio reports that a plane flying Roberto Clemente food and clothing to earthquake victims in Nicaragua is missing off the coast of San Juan. No bodies have been located, only debris floating in the waves. The words hit my chest like the fat end of a bat. I collapse at the base of the door until my mother cracks it, her own eyes raw, and picks me up, rocking slowly. A glove left in the Little League grass is all I knew of loss. Even though a stadium shouting, "Arriba, Roberto," was all I knew of Espanol, didn't I fall asleep most nights pretending he was my father? In our world of chipped asphalt and falling bricks, his John Henry swagger was perhaps all I knew of myth. Hadn't I taken a black crayon and drawn the number 21 on the back of a t-shirt, then raced to play right field because his glove upturned for a basket grab was all I knew of grace? Brown as spiced rum, blacker than barges of coal, he somehow covered the gap between Puerto Rico's cane fields and our Three Rivers. Dark smoke choked the sun. Our city of rusty bridges and rolling hills began to lose the glow from its fabled mills. And on a rocky Puerto Rican shore, his family gathered to him as waves peeked into shark's teeth and the arms of the palm trees swayed. Adios, Roberto. Arriba. Okay. So, Carolyn, you shared those some really great poems, by the way. Thank you for that. You shared a poem earlier about losing your mother or the kind of the process. I was older than you when I lost my father, but this is a poem that kind of addresses that. So this is a poem that's about my actual father, but then it's also about, I guess what people refer to as Heavenly Father. So I'll read the ghost poem and then I'll read the poem. This poem is also a sonnet, but it's not lined like a sonnet. But anyway, yeah, if I lined it out, it would be 14 lines, a non-rhyming sonnet, but I don't. Anyway, Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. I call you there, but here you can't. In some versions, a death we may voice, but don't. I call on you mainly in the alleys of memory. There, shards of smiles glitter the ground, but here we each wear almost identical names as scars, though you won't or can't remember what date I was born. Something trickles down the side of my face. In some versions, this may be all I've learned, how needles are hollow lines which collapse as many families as veins. Now a convict in death's work camp, you wither each day until we may count your T cells on one hand. When mama's voice asks through wires, do you have a dark suit to wear? I may be wrong, but I say, don't some of us wear black all day, every day, anyway? Okay, so still on the subject of fatherhood, but back to the math metaphors. This is essentially a poem about my failures as a father. So there's a series of poems in the book that are the blank in you, where blank is a famous person. So in this poem, the blank is Al-Khwarizmi, who's a famous Moorish mathematician. He was long credited as the inventor of algebra, although he actually just popularized it. And Al-Khwarizmi's name survives in the English language as the word algorithm. A couple of other things in math, and I think they actually changed this from the time I was growing up till now, but there's something called the order of operations. Okay, so there's a acronym that people use, PEMDAS, P-E-M-D-A-S, so you can remember what the order of operations is. So in this poem, I substitute the actual words, which are, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, with concrete objects. And so that's one thing that pops up. And then the other thing is I mentioned a couple of famous mathematicians who are associated with algebra or math in certain kind of ways. One of them is Descartes, one of them is Clifford, and the other one is Omar Khayyam, who was also a poet. The Al-Khwarizmi in you. The Al-Khwarizmi in you grasps the slope of your only child's eyes into, Daddy, when are you coming back? Even before he lays his head on the hollow around your heart, you strive to recall the order of operations for endive, date, apple, melon, pear, seaweed. Although he whispered to you once, his lips form empty brackets now. From this angle, the thesis in parenthesis seeks to approximate a transcendental equation. Even for Khayyam or Clifford, what delta doesn't divide Greek letters on opposite sides of said equation, or italicize absence by their presence? Meaning, aren't there two halves to all mathematics? The rules which we discover and the set of symbols which we invent to transcribe them. The algorithms covering distance multiply in the abacus of memory and begin to dream of whispering pear, endive, melon, date, apple, seaweed. Could there be a calculus for the arc of a ball not tossed between you? For the arcs of hours after the divorce where you try to solve for the function of X? Is the main idea of an infinite series how father and son might equal more than the sum of what they survive? As the parent in parenthesis, won't you bend every weekend to kiss even the imagined curve of his forehead? So yeah, again, avoiding all the emotional implications of the poem, talking about the idea of superimposition. So the word parenthesis, right? The first part of it is the word parent, and then the back part of it is the word thesis, but they share the T. So it's like the two words are superimposed inside of the word parenthesis. And so there's a couple of other places in this, in here where I play around with ideas, with words like that. So Sarah's here, actually, who I know from Split This Rock, which for many years was in DC. And so I spent a lot of time, I lived in DC for 19 years, and I used to hang out in a park. It's literally a traffic circle. But in DC, some of the traffic circles are also parks, and they're actually national parks patrolled by the park police. And so one of the more famous ones is in DuPont Circle. And there's a fountain in the middle dedicated to Admiral DuPont. And there's tables around the edges, and some of those tables are dedicated to chess players. And so I spent many hundreds of hours playing chess in DuPont Circle. But it's a popular gathering place for a lot of people, and musicians often come there and they play. So having said all that, my book is called Ideas of Improvisation. It's a riff off of Wallace Stevens' book, Ideas of Order. And so his most famous poem in that book is, well, I don't know if it's one of the most famous poems in that book is Ideas of Order at Key West, where he and a friend are listening to a woman sing. So this poem was written as kind of a riff, not kind of, a riff off of that. So it's called An Idea of Improvisation in DuPont Circle. And this is the first of all the Idea of Improvisation poems that I wrote. So in this one, I'm in DuPont Circle and there's a saxophone player and he's playing a song, Blackbird by the Beatles. And so in this poem, you will hear some references to the lyrics. And I also use the chord progression of the song Blackbird as language. So mostly as puns, not all good puns, but hey, we do what we can. So what else? And then there's a reference to Charlie Parker, who's known as Yardbird. So the ghost poem goes, siren circling a higher harmony, call to prayer. An idea of improvisation in DuPont Circle. A blackbird flies from a battered sax at the tonal center of the circle, its darkness tipping the fountain's waves, rippling flag-like under an April sky with a rhythm both black and white, though perchance only we can see what is sigil in its rights. Ignore the bystanders assuming the white fountain can't be metaphor or the soaring blackbird somehow symbol. It's true any blue-black whale over widening water, even raving evermore, might seem bound by simple chords if what spouted from the dreadlock musician was merely what he'd heard. But weren't these chords also voiced by bird, whose tarnished horn wasn't spurred by splashing water or rippling wind, but perhaps a sea sharply diminished within? If simply a cerulean sound in the fountain stirred or stilled the green bills in this case, or solely a white silence of clouds extended above, no matter how high, wouldn't it still be the yang of water, only brighter? Why then does he seem to read of a thing more jet than the yen of a blackbird's undulating wings on the wind? Is what his woodwind tries to sculpt more art or artifact? Could any sculpture ringed with purring pigeons be more than just a spouting place where he, God with a minor G, came to create? What chords are these? Which key? An eye nearly elusive as the eye of Stephen's blackbird looks to unravel its complex roots, but finds merely real chords it cannot. And as he blows, this epistle appalls and augments or diminishes any tint of that sky. What becomes artifact in our bicameral minds? Given how a minor seventh singing of starry darkness makes rings of paradox in admiral circles, could these broken wings extend any lift? Meaning, listen, who can say what the sunken eyes of our enslaved ancestors dreamt of darkly, thinking overboard of some minor sea? Oh, play, blackbird, riff on if, s'il vous plaît. These riddle passages were composed of changes you chose and by choosing tried to unchain. Contrafact what as the conductor of dusk dons his onyx tuxedo could swing in the traffic's rhythm, and why we, despite knowing a dominant chord shouldn't be conflated with a universal key, might sense in a siren circling above the basin, above even the arc and spume of its spray, a higher harmony. Not quite a call to prayer, but perhaps a small glare in the eye of Arise. Okay. All right. So I spend a lot of my time in casinos. I have spent a little bit more than the last 20 years, primarily earning my living as a professional poker player. And I engage in some, sports betting and some other forms of gambling. But this poem is titled An Idea of Improvisation is Compulsive Prayer. Apophenia is a fancy Greek word for the tendency that humans have to perceive order in things that are random. So, that could be the order of how the ball falls on the roulette wheel. It could be seeing the Virgin Mary in a pizza crust. So in my book, apophenia is not just a term, it's also kind of elevated to a character, a goddess, if you will. And so in my crazy poet brain, because there are in some spiritual traditions, including Ifa, which I was talking about earlier, there's a divination is a part of certain, like in the Tao Te Ching and also in Ifa, where people get readings, so maybe they throw cola nuts or you use numbers to determine which verse you're going to read. But that's divination is a form of improvisation. And so that links improvisation, at least in my mind, to the spiritual. So in that way, apophenia, which is what the process of divination involves, it elevates apophenia to a goddess. I mean, it works for me. I don't. So anyway, what else? I'll read the ghost poem, and then there's some more science shit in here. Erwin Schrödinger is a very famous physicist. So Schrodinger's equation, which is kind of like the basis for quantum physics, comes up in here. And Schrodinger's cat, which is a famous thought experiment that was dreamt up to, I guess, explain the absurdity of superposition, but it kind of lived on. So the idea is that Schrodinger's cat is a cat that's trapped in a box. And then in the box, there's a thing that's like a radioactive ion that's linked to the cover. So when you open it up, it either falls on one side and kills the cat, or it falls on the other side and the cat survives. And so mathematically, the cat, before you open the box, is both dead and alive. That's the implication of the mathematics. So that's
Thank you. No one's ever explained that.
right. So that's one of the weird things about the math of quantum mechanics. So in my poem, the cat can be either black or white, but it's a similar principle. Okay, so yeah, the ghost poem first. Black lipstick, a clarinet, her rosary. An idea of improvisation is compulsive prayer. What's the difference between chocolate and any other desire darkened? Or pray tell, which need registers deepest in the casino? Those giant shrines to apophenia, where a man who wagers by probability and therefore can't be addicted encounters the incompleteness theorem of a woman who dips to serve him dissolved spirits. Is it the vagus nerve which makes the octaves of chocolate in her skin French horn in the harmony in the music hall of his mouth? If and only if you've ever wagered and lost it all, then you might grasp why acquire means to gather, yet still not guess what it means to him. Could we still pretend that the fattest asymptote isn't objective reality if Schrodinger's equation employs imaginary numbers, or if any door besides endorphins opens our hunger to wheeling numbers? Is said door mascara black or lipstick red? Is this the part of the arc where our gambler pray tells if Schrodinger's cat is black as a clarinet strung around Rassan Roland-Kirk's neck? Or where he deduces luck may be merely an illusion and moves to recite her name in red as a rosary? So that's a revision, actually, of the way the poem appears in the book, because I'm sick like that. So yeah, I'm going to read a couple of more poems and then I'll let y'all be. So this is this poem is my father, as I referenced earlier, was a heroin addict for many years, and so there was a time where I was kind of fascinated, I guess, with some of these jazz musicians like Coltrane and Charlie Parker, Bill Evans is another one, who also were various times were heroin addicts. I mean, Miles Davis was in there and Thelonious Monk as well, but they kicked their heroin addictions. Well, I guess Coltrane technically did too, but destroyed his liver and it wound up killing him. So anyway, what do you need to know? Okay, so there's this tradition in jazz called a contrafact, where you take the chord progression from a famous song and then you write a new melody, and then it becomes a new song. And so in this poem, I mentioned the song How High the Moon, and one of Charlie Parker's most famous tunes is called Ornithology, and it's a contrafact of How High the Moon. And then also contrafact is part of my poetic process. So like, I would argue that one of the poems I read earlier, Idea of Improvisation of DuPont Circle, is a contrafact of Idea of Order at Key West. If you put the two poems side by side, it'll become real clear. So anyway, I'll read the ghost poem, and then what else? That's about it. Bird song, even the moon, a fractal. Tonight, a needle dives into a record's black skin with the drive of a dove winging against the window. And although this ain't the ballad of a wounded bird, one may still pursue in Charlie Parker's tone new ways to stress the moan in testimony. And listen, no matter how high the moon, could Bird ever transcribe any dove's burden with his knowledge of ornithology? Even if childhood hurts or a departed beloved led him to push the pegs of an arpeggio into the hole of his hunger? In some fashion, blue is nothing he ever loved, or nothing that ever loved him. Just the frequency of water or sky or bright tones in a bandana tied across his brow. But if some aqua hue fails to fill his lungs, would the blues still attune the ends of his grin to epistemology? Joy says birdsong proves the futility of words because what human could improve is contrafactual flow. And some nights, even the moon takes notes when Bird makes a fractal of a phrase, then flattens and sharpens 1/8 into a swollen vein. This paradox could remain hypodermic, a beaked flame of bird speak underneath a spoon's black skin, but let's say the song ain't over. Some cats will try to pull from Parker's tone as many parts wit as witness. Others insist the warp and woof of the blues can weave bandanas to flag down the yellow taxis of axioms. Bird lives, they claim, in this address of ghost notes, unexpected as ketchup on cornflakes. So we find ourselves still at the window as he mimes a horn's phonographic memory, which cannot choose what it does or doesn't save. Take a phrase, then fracture it, the solo seems to quote, until you feel how some tunes might fray into ontology, might bid one beg a slender hand to twist a band into a bandage. All right. So yeah, I'll read these last two poems. So we got to go back to Pittsburgh one more time. Yeah, as a kid, I played the trumpet, and then I got some teeth knocked out, and I couldn't play the trumpet anymore. There's a reference in here to a famous jazz trumpeter, Lee Morgan. I don't know if people are familiar with Lee Morgan. There you go. And so then you know how.
Oh, they drag myself.
Yeah.
Yes.
So for those of you who don't know, Lee Morgan was he was also addicted to heroin. He met this woman, and she got him cleaned up, got his career back on track and everything. And I guess she was his common law wife. Anyway, he was going to do a gig, and he showed up with the gig with another woman, and his wife was not having that. They had a discussion in between the sets, and the discussion was punctuated with a pistol. It was snowing outside. Lee Morgan wound up bleeding to death before the ambulance could arrive.
They're working on his historical landmark, and we'll see how much this.
Right. Right.
No. We're in New York for that, the final.
Yeah, this is actually a wonderful documentary. I think mostly written from his wife's point of view. It's available on I think it's on Netflix. So what else? Yeah. So let me read this damn poem. All right, there's I guess everybody in here knows who Pythagoras is. And what else? Yeah. So I'll read the ghost poem and then we'll do this. Mistranslation, the seeds of an imaginary evergreen. An idea of improvisation as the I in paradox. Once, Pythagoras, my purple plush toy, hummed joyful sounds only I could hear until metal teeth on the sprocket of logic severed his single horn. Newly numb and seeking to sew together his song, I took up the trumpet. Assuming no mistranslation, didn't Pythagoras praise music as sacred math? Numbers raised to the highest power. Here, I could note how the throats of birds tend to angle when raising the seeds of melody in their beaks. Was this how my school trumpet angled to be muted as moonlight flooded our shoebox apartment and I practiced what beauty was allowed? I believe Pythagoras could have allowed for the I in lyric as sign of an imaginary unit. Perhaps the bird part of our brains co-signed the seeds of language by angling our tangents towards evergreen musing about music. Can't the need inside a pine or a phonograph needle equally sow air into sense of song? Have you ever smelled oil in a trumpet's breath? Or felt rhythm uncoil to kill time around midnight? Logicians might prove that death has many fugues, though little logic, since death was once branded with the fugitive logo of the fleur-de-lis. I swear, my boy T claims this may be the truest thing about beauty. A lyric can be a useful essay, but an essay is a useless ass lyric. When I play the lyre, I claim to see lyrics collecting on lips as dew collects on dogwood leaves, but do I? Maybe I only took up the horn to learn how to hold apophenia and collect her breath in the bowl of my collarbone. After an errant elbow freed some teeth, I tried to pick up the horn again, but red graffiti scrawled in a school bathroom stall claimed a one-armed man could never play the violin. What trumpeter's mouth isn't an unread wound? Have you heard how Lee Morgan could read sheet music equally as his beloved's grocery notes, but still misread her most notable longing? There's some nights I think Pythagoras merely saw music as the grammar of sound-making sentences. But listen, who among us hasn't needed to number the hoarse notes galloping out of a bridled mouth? So I'll leave y'all with this. When I was a kid, I was maybe 10 years old, there was two kind of really popular spoken word acts in Black music. One of them was Gil Scott-Heron, and the other one was The Last Poets. So The Last Poets had a lot of different lineups, but in one of the lineups, there was a brother named Jalaluddin. And so I remember seeing it was an Arabic name, but it wasn't like an Arabic name like a lot of other people had chosen. So I thought he might be like Muhammad Ali and have chosen his name based on some famous person. So I went to the library because I was that kind of kid. I looked up in the library to look up his name to see who was the famous Jalaluddin that he was possibly naming himself after. And it turns out that it's a very famous Persian poet that everybody knows as Rumi. So couple of things here. One of them is this poem is in conversation with a famous Rumi quote that goes, where there is ruin, there's a chance for treasure. It's not a line from one of his poems, it's from some prose thing that he wrote. So Rumi, of course, is a Sufi poet, it's a spiritual tradition, what some people call the tradition of radical love. There's a lot of poets in that tradition. I would even consider, say, for example, Mary Oliver to be a poet in that, very much in that tradition. And the Sufi tradition goes back, over maybe 1,500 years now. If my math is good, my math's not good. It's like 1,400 years. And is similar to, I think, the Zen tradition, which also is, a long tradition through Japan and then back through Chinese poetry. So anyway, this is the Rumi in you. I'll read the ghost poem first. And yeah. Thank you all for coming out and for being an attentive audience and putting up with my various digressions. So this is the Rumi in you. Addiction, central to faith, windblown rain. The Rumi in you stirs to wonder. Oh, actually, I should have said this before. So one of the things in this poem, we're getting back to for the last time, this idea of superposition. In this poem, in the second line is the question, what bruise could ruin love? And so in that sentence, ruin can be a verb. So then the sentence would mean what bruise could degrade love? Or ruin could be a noun. And then it could be read as what bruise could ruin a door? So those are sentences with slightly different meanings. So this poem is written in such a way that regardless of which way you interpret it, it will follow one of those trails, or at least that's what I was trying to do here. So yes, this is another way of me playing with the idea of superposition. So like in that case, the grammatically in that word, in that sentence, there's two different meanings that are superimposed. And so once you come out of that, you can follow, one trail or the other. But anyway, sorry, the roomie in you. The roomie in you stirs the wonder. What bruise could ruin love more than the rasp of eroding rain? When you hear rasp, you may think of rust, another type of ruin related to rain. Do you not grasp how Jalaluddin was among the last poets whose nappy beard faced ruin in every nation, including rumination? As one harvest moon acquired a goatee of clouds, didn't you almost admit to whiskering a weak chin as if your own ruined beauty was an unwearable thing? Although you've seldom whispered it, wabi-sabi, Japanese for the rain of ruin, could be a roomy word. When you first heard the flamenco of ruin begin to flower, what did you lament? Could such lonely bruising have begun addiction to the long open you found in wound? Or say why that eye so central to your faith ran quietly as a letter left out in the rain? Perhaps outside some window, you misheard a whirling music of windblown petals whispering, rain in mystery. But as you once heard a bruise begin to whisk a thickening rue from a flower's fat sorrow, couldn't your beard have also masqueraded as faith or masculinity? Or perhaps even a beloved which blooms through dark whiskers until there's a chance you hear how some folk become lovers of the sound of rain, but others simply lovers of the sound of ruin. My name is Joel Diaz Porter. Thank you.
I can do like a little plug stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, get down, dude.
All right. Thank you, so much. Such a rich conversation. And just the many ways to read the book. It kind of goes back to what Kerwin said of like the engaging the first time, right? And knowing it's a feature, not a bug, right? And that just opened me up to like go back into the text and be like, okay, well, what if I went this way instead of that way? So I'm really thankful for that generous reading. The book is sold in two ways at threadmakesblanket.com, right? There's one, it's $17. You just get the print book, which is a gift in itself. And then at $25, you get the book, but also the amazing broadside of still life. And that is available at threadmakesblanket.com. We'll make sure that when we post this, that we'll put the link there as well. I guess you can find Joel at the nearest Atlantic City casino near Boca Room. Like to see you. Kerwin, Jump Ship is still available. So you can find Kerwin Sutherland's Jump Ship. Raina, Black Freighter Press has your new title.
Yeah,
God Body.
Black God, Motherless Body.
Black God, Motherless Body, Black Freighter Press, that is also available. So all of our poets do have text available. They make amazing holiday gifts this season. I really encourage you all to engage with them. And yeah, so I committed to be here till about 8. So maybe we can set up a poker table time and we can figure it out. But I want to show, if anyone who hasn't been to Ropes House before, definitely want to open up the space and kind of show you around. And we'll drop some music, move around some chairs, and just hang out for a minute. And thank you all for coming. Thank you, Thread Makes Blanket Press. Thank you to our poets. And we'll see. Oh, and we have a book signing. Yeah, you get your book signed too, certainly while you're here. And I don't know, we got the Museum of Black Joy is here. Shout out to the Museum of Black Joy. Our final calendar next week, we're back with Anna Bodkin, whose essay collection, Bright Unbearable Reality, was longlisted for the National Book Award. Coming home off of tour, so we'll be celebrating sort of like a homecoming, and just that work. So we're really excited about that. And then December 13th, is my final event of the season. And we'll be debuting our community archiving workspace, which is in the 4949 building. And it's both a space to honor this building, the West Philadelphia Cultural Alliance has been here doing work in West Philly since 1984. The Robeson House opened in 94. So there's like 30, 40 years of history of cultural organizing that we're working through and collecting and sharing stories from. But we're also opening up the space for folks, many of the folks in this room who are doing deep public memory work to say, like, what are the tools that we all need to be able to, one, do the research, but then also, you know, how do we turn those into installations, exhibitions, new poetry, new essays, new prose? And I'm really excited for anybody to talk about that work as well. So thank you all for being here tonight. We'll cut the stream, turn on some music, and we'll just keep going. And get your book signed.
Kitchen in this house here, or is that a room?
Like behind this, that's a closet.
Okay.
So where was the kitchen? Right there. So you got a shared kitchen in the back, open it up. Oh.